Turkiye is hosting a meeting on Gaza later on Monday with several key countries, including Qatar and Egypt. The so-called stabilisation force, a central element of the ceasefire's second phase, could play a significant part in the talks, although there's still no confirmation how the force will work or who'll be involved. Ali Hashem has this report.
The war may be over for now, but peace is nowhere in sight. Gaza's next battle isn't fought with bombs, but blueprints. 2 weeks after the US brokered ceasefire, diplomats are selling a new idea. One of the main aspects of the deal, an international stabilization force to secure Gaza and pave the way for reconstruction, a plan that involves multiple nations and their interests. Backed by Washington, it was meant to be the backbone of post-war security. But even before it can be deployed, the plan is stalling. The Trump administration framed it as a multinational force. The US may seek UN sponsorship of the mission, making it possible for nations that require a UN mission mandate before they can legally deploy troops, replacing both Hamas's rule and Israeli soldiers on the ground. But every country is asking the same question. Under whose authority will they serve, and who are they protecting? And will this be a peace enforcement force or a peacekeeping force? Israel insists on controlling Gaza's overall security and vetoing the presence of some countries, including Turkiye. Egypt, wary of domestic backlash, hesitates. Jordan fears being dragged into Gaza's chaos. The Palestinian Authority refuses to return behind what it calls foreign guns, while Hamas calls the plan an occupation in disguise. 3 layers of resistance now block the mission: regional mistrust, Israeli veto, and the absence of a shared political vision for Gaza's future. The UN hasn't endorsed the force, reluctant to back a mission without consensus or legitimacy. History shows peacekeeping without strength rarely keeps the peace. On the ground, Palestinians in Gaza wait for electricity, for aid, for answers. Who will rebuild? Who will govern them? Who will protect them? Their suffering underscores the urgent need for a resolution. For now, the so-called stabilization force remains a plan without a force and a vision without a plan. Until there's an agreement on Gaza's political future, every talk of stabilization risks creating more instability, because in Gaza, peace built on uncertainty rarely lasts, and the potential for further unrest is a genuine concern. Ali Hashem, Al Jazeera.
Well, before we move on, I want to bring you an update on that exchange of captives and Palestinian bodies. These are some of the latest images we're getting of at least 45 bodies of Palestinians being sent from Israel into Khan Yunis. As you can see, these bodies being brought out of refrigerated vans. They're being taken to a hospital, and we know from the past that the bodies have then gone through forensic analysis. They've been identified, and for quite a substantial amount of time now, several weeks, families have been amassing at some of these centres to try and work out whether the bodies returned are indeed the bodies of their loved ones. More on that, of course, as and when we get it. All right, well, let's bring in Akiva Eldar, a political analyst joining us from Tel Aviv. Akiva, before we can talk about the stabilisation of Gaza, let's talk about the ongoing violence and the obstacles to peace. I mean, the Rafah crossing, Gaza's only link to the outside world, remains closed. That's contrary to the ceasefire plan. And Benjamin Netanyahu continues to call in powerful strikes on targets in Rafah. What, in your mind, is going on here?
As far as I understand, it's not just a bilateral issue between Israel and Hamas, or trilateral between Israel, Hamas, United States, and the other facilitators, such as Qatar and Egypt. It's also a domestic issue, since declaring end of the war is also declaring elections in Israel, early elections, and accepting probably it will be not just a demand of the Israeli opposition and other civil society organizations, but also the High Court in Israel will demand a full-fledged commission that will inquire the whereabouts and the blunders that made this 7th of October possible.
You're saying, Akiva, let me distill what you've just said. You're saying that this is, in your mind, some degree of an effort to prolong a low-level conflict, at least in Gaza, to avoid internal scrutiny of Benjamin Netanyahu and his government's handling of the war and the prosecution of it.
Yeah, I think that actually both sides, Netanyahu and Hamas, have several reasons to keep dragging their feet. For instance, what Hamas is doing with the bodies, with the remains of the Israeli captives or the Israeli soldiers that were killed during the war, and doing this drop by drop. And we still have another 8 bodies there. And on the other side,
Akiva, even US President Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have acknowledged the Herculean task of locating the remains of Israeli captives in and amongst something like 60 to 90 million tons of rubble in Gaza after years of Israeli bombardment of the Strip. You're suggesting that this is a delaying tactic by Hamas to gain some degree of leverage. Is that really what you're suggesting?
What I'm suggesting is that Hamas has a good reason to gain time, because it's now, according to the Israeli intelligence, they are recruiting new young militants that will are joining them. According to the Israeli IDF, they already have been able to recruit around 30,000 members from, that there is no vacuum there. And Netanyahu has a problem because with the time that Hamas is gaining, it will become more difficult for him to declare total victory and go to early elections, declare early elections with his total victory.
Akiva, in the context,
Hamas
understood. I mean, in the context of what we are seeing in Gaza and the hopes, of course, of a lasting ceasefire and the return of bodies and detainees from both sides, I mean, how would you explain what's going on in southern Lebanon at the moment? This apparent change of strategy by Tel Aviv. We've seen raids, we've seen drone attacks there. Is that another attempt by the Netanyahu government to continue waging war in the region to stay in power?
I think that what Netanyahu is doing now is trying to convince the international community and the United States that you cannot trust the Arabs. It's not just the Hamas. Actually, the Lebanese government and the Hezbollah are playing right into his hands because they have made a commitment to disarm Hezbollah's forces, that it will be, like Abu Mazen kept saying, it will be one state, one army, one gun. So what he's saying is, look, the Lebanese government, and actually unlike Hamas, where there is no government that Israel recognizes, let alone, in a place like Lebanon, where you have a sovereign government. Lebanon is a state, member of the UN, and still they are not able to disarm the Hezbollah, which is, according to Israel and in many countries, is a terrorist organization. But to make it more complicated, I think that Netanyahu doesn't really have an interest to put an end to this conflict, because that means also that Israel will have to withdraw to the international border and start negotiating also the 13, 12 points of friction along the border that the Lebanese have a good claim about it.
Understood, Akiva. Many thanks as always. Akiva Eldar there joining us in Tel Aviv.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.